Why do so many brands struggle to entertain their audience?
Because that is not what a brand's primary function is.
I wish they would make a huge cake.
There's all these things that, again, have been in like the traditional media playbook and marketing playbook that are just easy way to light all your money on fire.
And so I'm curious if this is like an interchangeable concept, point of view, or character, or how you think about brand in the world.
A brand exists in sort of a, like, here's a PDF of our brand book, and here's our tone of voice, and we talk like this, and we don't talk like this. Like, as people, we love watching characters. I mean, pick any movie that you love or TV show. Like, the characters, sometimes they don't make sense, or sometimes they're like, they surprise you, or they do weird things, and you like them because they're a little messy. The idea of a brand is usually to box things in. I think like a character is much more of like an expansive idea.
What's the principle, though, that can be applied at any scale from what you guys figured out how to do?
It's humor. I mean, people share what's funny and what they love. There is no faster way to connect with someone than through a joke. It's not a considered tool in the toolkit for a lot of people. And it's partly why we're able to do all the stuff that we're able to do, is because nothing ever stays the same over here.
And the fact that you haven't written anything down.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, we're making this up, man.
Andy, welcome to the podcast. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
I appreciate you taking the time. The first question I wanted to ask you of many is, why do so many brands struggle to entertain their audience?
Because that is not what a brand's primary function is. It is to sell things to people that they may or may not need. And so usually the people behind the brand, their intention is to make people part with their money first and foremost. And, you know, the straightest line that some people can draw to that is, you know, try to list off some things that they think would be convincing to someone on why they might want to buy their product or service, and then let that do the work. And while obviously that does work in some instances, in some industries, and in certain contexts, the action is, the intention is for the company to, you know, ultimately reap the benefit and not the person on the other side. And so I think, people are often behind brands, I think often are not. And I always say it's an extractive practice. Marketing is inherently extractive, right? We're trying to get something out of people rather than inherently give them something in that interaction.
It feels like maybe you have a different take on what is perhaps the right way to approach that.
I mean, I have a different perspective. And again, like, you know, I've been doing this Liquid Death thing for almost exactly 5 years now. And I think we've seen what has worked for us. You know, I won't say that it's the right thing for everybody in every situation, but man, as a human being and a consumer, quote unquote, who gets shit thrown at them all day by other marketers, I certainly wish that people would consider like me when they're making their work. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, what we're really setting out to do with stuff at Liquid Death, or just in general, I think, is to bring something to people that is genuinely entertaining. And entertaining can certainly mean a lot of things, but by starting with something that someone will find genuinely entertaining, and then decide how that can function as an ad, versus the inverse is essentially the way, you know, it's always kind of traditionally been approached. It's like, hey, what ad can we make? What do we need to say in the ad? What does the takeaway mean to be? And then, like, can we work a joke in there? And it's, you know, it's sort of the like medicine with a spoonful of sugar sort of method, right? It's like, and now here's a little joke so you don't hate us for interrupting you. But if we can actually start from a place of making something that people want to watch or ingest or enjoy, then there's always an easy way to figure out how to make that function as a piece of communication that works for a business as well.
Has advertising always been extractive? Like, go back to whenever the first advertisement was ever created? Like, has this always been the nature of it?
Well, if you want to go really far back, I would say, yeah. I mean, if you're going back all the way back to like, 19th century, like newspaper ads and stuff like that. But that was obviously like, you just repeat the thing 5 times or 3 times or whatever. The funny thing is, if you look back at some of the stuff that was made in like the 90s and early 2000s, there was some wild shit that was on TV. There was some really remarkable, crazy spots. And obviously it was like a really different media landscape than we live in today. God, I'm just talking about like media landscapes and stuff on a podcast. It sounds so professional. But it was a totally different kind of context for the way that advertising worked, and the fewer channels, and you had much greater attention span, and not so much the ability to target different audiences. So you kind of had to make things with a little bit of a more broad appeal that would pull people in. And I think now with the sort of fracturing of media, which in some respects is really good, but in other respects, it means that brands have to make way more things and have to be much more targeted. And generally it means the quality of that stuff goes down because, we're all doing more all the time, and there's still only 24 hours left in the day that we have to do it in. So inherently some of the quality and thought behind that stuff kind of tends to go down.
If you had to like give me a candid analysis of the outdoor industry and the content and the creative and the campaigns that are being produced, how's the industry doing?
I think there's interesting stuff going on. I think, just for background, my perspective, I'm lover of outdoors, but my main focus is ultra running. So I'm kind of looking at it through, more a like trail running lens of the stuff that I see. But I think it's an exciting time because I think there's a lot of brands that are being started by younger, quote unquote, younger people who actually kind of grew up in this kind of like internet media landscape and are creating some really interesting brands, and are seeing that by doing more standout work, they can kind of like quickly make a name for themselves. I think maybe the days of like the beautiful 30-minute documentary that somehow is brought to you by Patagonia at the end or something, as wonderful as that stuff is, I think, again, like people don't have the attention span to watch stuff like that or to kind of take it in. And so I think like there's sort of like a modernization underway, at least again from my perspective, on just like the way that brands are being built and the way that they talk in the outdoor space. And I think it's kind of exciting, and I think it is hopefully kind of drawing in new people from the outside that maybe wouldn't have felt like they were being spoken to before.
Who are some brands that are of note that you're keeping track of?
I mean, love or hate them, Satisfy is doing wild shit. And I have so much respect for those guys. I got to actually meet them early on. Like when I started Liquid Death, they hit us up like maybe 4 years ago, and they really wanted to put on a race in Death Valley together or something like that. And I was like, hey man, I'd love to. I don't think we're equipped to like put on an ultra race. That's not really how Liquid Death is like set up to do that. But I love that they're just coming in with such a wildly different perspective. Obviously very divisive, but like hard to ignore. And, no matter what you think of the Circle Pit, people are talking about it.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So, one of the things I'm excited to like try to understand your perspective on is, as we're launching this, what we're calling the Relevance Project.
Yeah.
I want you to try to like pressure test some of this stuff for me and tell me what what your hypothesis is. Do you think there's something valid here? Like, what are we maybe not thinking about? Like, what
Yeah.
blind spots might we have? So some of the questions that I'm hoping that we can answer with this is, can a brand that consistently creates audience-first content reduce its reliance on paid media while maintaining or improving the efficiency of that paid media? What measurable signals indicate that building an owned audience is creating future demand? And then the last one, can consistently creating high-attention content increase a brand's share of voice, and does that correlate with revenue downstream? These are some of the things that I'm wondering about. Like, what's your first gut impression of those questions?
Of the questions themselves, I think I think those are certainly all the right questions to be asking. Is like, does this kind of thinking have genuine impact? Do you want to go through them and talk about each?
Sure, yeah, please.
Okay, so what was the first one again?
First one was, can a brand that consistently creates audience-first content reduce its reliance on paid media and or improve its efficiency of paid media?
Yeah, almost certainly. I mean, again, well, assuming that the work that they're making is great and it's connecting, I mean, I guess we'll make that assumption across the board here. But we've certainly seen that. Liquid Death, for our first maybe like 4 years, really didn't buy media. Our growth was done almost exclusively through organic. Through our own organic channels. We're now up to about 7.5 million on Instagram followers, and then also about 7.5 on TikTok as well. It's something like that. It's about 15 total. And that was all, grown almost exclusively just through organic content, through both sort of what I'd call like higher produced quote unquote campaign pieces, which I don't really like to think of them as campaigns, but just kind of like bigger content plays. And then also sort of the ground and pound social content that we're doing. We're at a scale now where we do have kind of switched into a more media focused mode, just based on where we are in our growth as a brand. But yeah, I mean, certainly the early years, the first like many, many years that I was here, it was almost entirely organic. And, if you want to get real into it, like, the social platforms are sort of doing more of a pay to play at this point with a lot of their content, where they are, there is a bit more boosting required and putting some money in to make sure that people are actually seeing your content. But certainly it's available if the content is good and it's getting out there.
So for someone who's listening to this, like for instance, some of the brands that we're talking with, right? They're like a solo owner operator. They're sewing clothes in their living room and they're listening to this and they're like, well, I'm not Liquid Death. Right. What's the principle though that can be applied at any scale from what you guys have figured out how to do?
I mean, to me, again, it's about making, since we're sitting here talking about the Relevance Project, unexpectedly relevant work. And I think there's two things. There's some people that, in the marketing space are kind of chasing trends, kind of trying to invent viral content. And that certainly is one way. And you'll see these little like spikes from some random taco shop that has like some incredible viral video that's spread around. And, I don't know what their full idea is, other than they had a really good idea one day and they put it out there. I think for us, it's humor. I mean, people share what's funny and what they love. And I think, like for us, our playbook from the beginning has been to be the Red Bull of humor. Like that was a really simple notion from pretty early on that's what we wanted to be. Because if you look at, humor is, everybody wants to laugh. Everyone wants great content. Like the stuff that I always share with my dumb friends are always like, someone getting hit by a bull at a rodeo after they did a backflip off a fence because it was really funny. But like, it is a universal thing, and I think humor is not something that is often it just isn't given much credence in the marketing world because for a number of reasons, because it's not serious. It seems like it's harder to do than other, than a very easy thing that's just going to be, we're going to talk about how great these pants are and not worry about doing humor. But to me, the thing that I always say, it's like humor requires that the person on the speaking end and the receiving end are both looking at something and agreeing that it's true. And so like, there's no faster way to connect with someone or to get to the truth than through a joke. And I think that it's not a considered tool in the toolkit for a lot of people because maybe it feels too hard or but it doesn't, it just takes practice.
Was the playbook built around organic because that's what was possible, or because you saw more power in organic than paid at the time?
Really both. I mean, especially when we were early days, we were and still are startup. So, the money, is limited. And so, I mean, it comes from like old days I was lucky enough to work at some really big agencies and, ad agencies, and like this one, Crispin Porter Bogusky, that, was this really incredible agency out of Boulder, Colorado for a while. And they didn't, I wouldn't say they necessarily invented it, but they kind of weaponized, for lack of a better word, this idea that like earned media can do, it takes your little tiny thing and it goes way farther than you could ever do with any sort of media spend. And so, when we look at the stuff we do at Liquid Death, we're able to, when we look at the actual budget, the media spend that we would have had to get the reach of some of the things we're achieving, I mean, it is like hundreds of times X what we spent on the actual original piece of content to begin with. It just helped, you can just go so much further. So again, as a tiny starting out company, obviously that's really the way to go. You see a lot of people dump money into, I would say like meaningless thing, like media in the hopes that this is going to be it. I think, like sponsorships and stuff like that. I mean, we get hit up for dirt bike from like dirt bike riders, or, they're like, we'll put your logo on whatever. And that stuff, there's all these things that again have been in like the traditional media playbook and marketing playbook that are just easy way to light all your money on fire. And certainly like, chasing virality, chasing organic social is way more difficult than cutting a check to someone and putting a logo out there or running something. But on the flip side, the rewards are, significantly higher if you feel like you have the ability to be able to make work that connects with people.
And is the end result of that an audience? Is that what you're after? Or like, how do you think about audience building? Is it right for everyone? Do you view it as an asset? How do you think about it?
Yeah. I mean, for us, again, like we started from zero. Essentially 6.5 years ago, we did not exist. And now, we became one of the fastest growing non-alcoholic beverages on the planet. And yeah, so we've been really stoking like the awareness play early on. And, I remember when I started, it was like, it was like 1% of people knew who we were. Like aided awareness was like 1% or something. And, through all of our moves, we're have massive awareness now, because of what we've been doing. And so, yes, bigger audience. Are all those people necessarily picking up Liquid Death every day. Certainly not, because we're growing kind of a bigger audience. But that was the idea, was to make Liquid Death into sort of like a content hub that people would draw in, and so yeah, we've grown sort of like our slice of the sort of media pie. And then on top of that, like I said, because we've been lucky enough that we've grown this massive audience. Now, anytime we do something and we want to put it out, suddenly we have crazy owned channels across social and CRM and PR. Not PR is not owned, but we've proven ourselves there as well. So people really want to cover what we're doing. And so anytime we do something new, it's like a pretty easy lever to pull. And then on top of that, for us, this is another thing to consider, with small businesses is, with like retailers and stuff as well. Like the shelf space is, if you're ever selling in retail, you're not just convincing people that you have a great product. You have to consider a whole new set of suits somewhere in a room that people also want your product. And so you have to have a really compelling business story to show them. So us walking into a room and saying, hey, you've never heard of us, but we have a following of 4 million on Instagram or whatever it was at the time. Like that's a massive foot in the door on that. So some of the moves have been both on the consumer front and then also sort of on the more hidden, business front as well.
I see. When is audience building the wrong approach to take for a brand? Like what set of circumstances would have to internally make for that to not be the move to make? Is there ever a situation where it's not valuable or the quote unquote right choice?
That's a good question. I think obviously there are probably some, no, I mean, I think the one thing would just be if you've grown an audience that's like so wildly irrelevant for what you're actually doing. And I see that sometimes with like some of the brands that are kind of viral for reasons that are adjacent to their brand, but not the brand itself. And so I do often wonder if like that stuff is really as helpful as it could be when maybe the consumer and the audience aren't overlapping. But again, like, I mean, the more eyeballs and the more people you can reach with your message, you're just allowing more opportunities to get people in the system. And then as you grow later on, then suddenly you have, hopefully you continue to grow, and then maybe you eventually move into more targeted media. Now suddenly you have a great way you have all this, data on your audience, and you're able to segment and really kind of get smarter about how you're approaching people within that audience that you've grown.
Do you have any examples that you can share that demonstrate a higher efficiency in the paid media that you're doing now because you took the time to figure out the organic side, like what people actually want to watch?
Everything we make, we're thinking of, posting it on social first, really. And so rather than starting with like, hey, let's run a TV commercial, let's make a TV spot, we are building something that is inherently, I'd say, kind of more like gripping than a traditional commercial. And so we see the numbers on the performance of like something that we're running on CTV, and they're always blowing away benchmarks by many factors, because like, hey, guess what? We didn't set out to make a TV commercial, but it's in a pod with a bunch of other TV commercials, and so this thing that doesn't feel like the other ones, of course, people are noticing and are actually watching and interacting with. So, that's, we always, everything we do, we always see like higher, usually high, like way higher than industry benchmarks on ROAS and CTE and all this stuff. And, it's partly because it's a brand, I think itself is so arresting, but it's also because the work is crafted to function higher. And then our head of media loves us because we do all this like top of funnel work that then suddenly pulls all these people in, and suddenly we have all this all these great people, this great work that gets people in the door, and then they can kind of get dumped into that funnel later on. So my our head of media always talks about loving our top of funnel.
Have you ever tried to make like a non-Liquid Death-esque commercial, like make a normal commercial and just see what would happen?
For Liquid Death?
Yeah.
No. I mean, we probably, I think that'd be really hard to do. Just like a really boring commercial and just throw it in. Yeah. No, that would be a funny test is like, I haven't thought of that. Yeah. Maybe we should do that.
So one of my other questions was like, what measurable signals indicate that building an audience is creating future demand or will lead to future demand? Do you have any way to try and, like, if I was talking to a CFO and I was like, okay, this is the audience that we're building. However, we're not having an impact on revenue today. How can I try and articulate that or project that down the road? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it is, it's certainly a little bit of the magic. I think there's obviously this whole thing is science and magic together, and you have to kind of, I don't know if that I can point to anything specific, like here's the exact measurement that if you show this to somebody, you're going to grow. But I mean, again, like for us, it's, like I said, we've grown, for us in particular, we've grown awareness so high. And so now what it just means is that we are able to convert some of our efforts into a more conversion space. And so now we've done the really hard work of getting people over the hump of even knowing who the fuck we are. And so now with a team around us, we're able to sort of turn on those faucets to another type of media, another type of creative, and make it work. So I don't think it's like pointing necessarily to any one point of data, but it's more that you've understanding that there's sort of these continual phases in the marketing journey, and it depends on which one you're in, which will be most important to you, and then how do you sort of evolve into that next phase as you've grown. And we did it first, like some companies were focused totally on the early stage conversion stuff, and they really don't care about the brand building, and you're just running all this D2C stuff. And we took a really opposite approach that brands tend to not follow as much, I think, as they're launching, because it's really easy to do the I didn't mean this in a denigrating way, but like the simpler creative, the stuff that's really easy to turn on, that's easy to pump out. And so it's a much smaller barrier to entry. And of course you can kind of get the immediate sales boost, but then are you giving up a chance to grow an even bigger brand down the road? And so that was, that's part of the, I guess, calculation that we've been making.
Are you a patient person?
Yeah, I would say so. Yes. I'm probably way too patient, actually. Yeah.
Is that why? I mean, I know it's more than just you who's leading this thing, but is that in part why you feel like this approach works?
Well, I mean, it's definitely not just me. Our founder was a designer, creative himself from ad agency days, and he understands that the thing we're doing is a long game. It's like you can't just turn on something overnight and expect the money to flow in. That we're kind of building a body of work over time, and so yeah, I think we see creators. I mean, like, dude, this my favorite story about this is I worked at this agency called Deutsch, and I worked in the pizza account for about a year, and I was not really involved in the rebrand, but this is back in, like, I don't know, 2014 or something, and they decided they want to do a full rebrand. And so they worked on this big rebrand, new logo, this whole campaign. It was involved with this. There was already this menu overhaul that they were doing, and they shot this big campaign. They went to Italy to shoot all these spots and came back. I mean, this took like over half a year to put this whole thing together. And they launched the new brand and the new campaign, and they were like a week into the launch, and Pizza Hut was like, yeah, the numbers, they're not popping. We're going to pull the work. And I just remember being on the sidelines and I was like, what the fuck? You did a full rebrand, and after a week they felt like the numbers weren't hitting, and they dropped the campaign. And I was like, I felt like I was taking crazy pills. And there's like that sort of thinking is just, that's the kind of stuff I think that like leads to us being like, give things time, let them grow, do your thing. And also, I mean, I'd say also part of the thing that we've learned here is like just trying a lot of things and seeing what works is in a lot of ways the best way to do stuff. You never know what's going to hit from one thing to a next. And it's the same way as, the way like comedians work is that they're like rewriting jokes and trying new stuff out live. And you have to kind of like throw stuff out there to figure out what it works. We work very quickly, but it's kind of a slower process of like shaping things live over time versus trying to get it perfect the first time out the door. And then maybe you've put all this time and energy in something and it misses. Like maybe the better way is to try little things over time that don't take as much work and aren't quite as polished, but suddenly like now you've tried this thing and this thing works, but this thing doesn't. And so I think that's been a lot of what we've been doing here is testing out things live, like small bets and seeing what works, and then putting money and gas behind things that we now know for sure when we've got a winner on our hands.
Yeah. That agency story makes me think that's great job security for the agency, assuming they didn't get fired out of that whole rebrand.
Oh no, they did. No, well, Pizza Hut chose it. Pizza Hut would pick a new agency like every 8 months. They were awful.
Okay.
It's one of those things where it's like you're like, it's definitely if it's like if you always have shitty roommates, it's like maybe it's not them kind of situation. It's very much the same way with them. They like always kept jumping agencies every couple of months, and you're like,
Yeah, it's like, oh, how do I end up in a bad relationship every single relationship?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, I want to run this concept by you. I feel like part of the reason why outdoor brands, like, I'll use the sea of sameness description. A lot of the reason why someone even fall into that is because they don't have a distinct, or not even distinct, just like an interesting point of view on the world.
Yeah.
That then informs how they show up in that world.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree, disagree? I know you talk a lot about thinking about brand as a character.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious if this is like an interchangeable concept, point of view, or character, or how you think about brand in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think, sea of sameness is very difficult in outdoor space because, it's like, how many trees are we going to show in this one? Maybe we'll put 5 in this time, or, you're all kind of working from the same clay in a sense. There's the palette is so much smaller, right? And so it makes sense. It makes sense that there would sort of be a mushing towards the center of what everything looks and sounds like. And but yeah, the way that what you're talking about, I kind of tend to think of Liquid Death, and I think we should think of brands as characters. And to kind of unpack that, a brand is like a brand exists in sort of a, like, here's a PDF of our brand book, and here's our tone of voice, and we talk like this, and we don't talk like this, and we would never do this, but we would do this. But the characters are just like fucking weirdos, and we, like, as people, we love watching characters. I mean, pick any movie that you love or TV show, like the characters, they sometimes they don't make sense, or sometimes they're like, they surprise you, or they're they do weird things, and you like them because they're a little messy, maybe, or whatever it is. And so I think like if we start, the idea of a brand is usually to box things in, right? A brand is like a box that is contained, and I think like a character is much more of something that can go out in the world and is more like an expansive idea, and doesn't always make you can't sometimes can't even write it down and understand it. Like early on with I've told this story before, but like early on with Liquid Death, I was trying to build a brand book just to figure out what I was doing, and everything I wrote down I hated, and I hated this whole document that I was building that was like had these little pithy explanations of what we do as a brand. And so like after like 5 or 6 months, I was just like, fuck it, we're just not gonna have a brand book. And I think it was like a pretty consequential decision that I didn't realize at the time, because it was like, right, we just like let it go and be where it wants to be. And I think the brand is a very direct reflection of all of us who work on it, because it's really 1-to-1 on all the weird things in our heads. And so if you're having a small brand that you're building, like that's great. You have a real impact in kind of thinking of that differently. And the nice thing that the brand does is it helps, it causes action, and it rather than like, hey, let's make an ad, it's the thought of like, what would X brand or company or whatever, what would we do in this situation? And it leads to just kind of a different way of existing and thinking in the world. That's not so much about like shouting and telling you what we value. It's about how do we prove it out, or how do we do something, or how do we show up somewhere. And so especially in something that like, again, in a very social forward landscape, like it allows for the brand to kind of be living and breathing and interact with people and have encounters and do weird stuff that maybe wouldn't normally be expected. And I don't mean in like a goofy character way. I mean in like a deep, like, who is the, like, if we imagine this as an entity bumbling through the world, like how does it bump into people, and what happens when that occurs?
So to this day, there's zero documentation that describes the brand.
Yeah. I couldn't. I mean, we have some like visual brand guidelines on stuff, but I mean, I honestly couldn't. I don't think I could describe what Liquid Death is to anybody if I was like forced to. Maybe at gunpoint I could, but usually I just say like, hey, go watch our YouTube channel. Like, just go there, and like even when we bring employees on, I'm like, hey, good luck, man. I don't know what to tell you. Just, but I'm like, hey, go watch everything we've ever made, and you'll get it. And,
I see.
And you have to kind of like absorb it more than be told it, also, because, and it's funny now, because even early days when we'd work with partners or brands or other people or whomever, people would really, if they were like pitching us ideas, they were totally off. They're like, then it's like a death metal thing, and the Grim Reaper is descending from this. And we're like, guys, we're a funny brand. Like, we're not trying to be scary or hard. We're trying to be funny, and we just use that stuff to be funny. And I have noticed now, after years, like the quality of stuff that we get when people are pitching us ideas, like people are a lot more on board because they've kind of understood it after so many years. But people liked us before, but I don't think they fully understood why. And I think now, over time, it's become a little bit more ingrained.
Is your recommendation to not document anything? And
I wouldn't advise that. I mean, I do think like, here's also my practical side on that thing. I was like going back to the Pizza Hut thing too. It's like, you build a brand book, you do all this work, and then it becomes a 115-page PDF that goes on your desktop until your desktop gets too cluttered that like somehow it just ends up in your trash, and you never look at it again. And the other thing I think is really tough about doing that sort of like upfront branding, and I've experienced this many times in my career, is it's all theoretical until you have to make something. And you probably know what I'm talking about, where you're like, okay, here are the brand guidelines. And then you're like, now we got to make this thing. And you're just like,
well, so I don't know, 2 months ago, I was scrolling through an old client's brand book. They're a cycling manufacturer.
Yeah.
And I was going over it because I was like developing this project in the background. I was like, I want to look at all the brand books I've ever been sent.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, it was like, here's our visual identity, here's our attributes, here's our core customers. And then when it got to the slide about digital content, the strategic recommendation was invest in big, bold YouTube content. And I was like, what are you supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
And so like translating a brand into something that's actually interesting and into content, like that's a whole nother piece of the brand book that seems to be missing.
Yeah. And I guess to my point, it's not something that you can like predict in a vacuum. Like you even when you do these, and again, I've built plenty of brand books. It's like you have some theories. You're like, here's what we think is good. And then usually when the rubber meets the road, you're just like, this doesn't work, or like, this is not even close. And so you have to kind of like, I think that thinking, it helps get some things down on paper, but until you start to, and I think that's why like thinking about it like a character, it can be helpful too, is then you're like, okay, yeah, but what do we do? And then you kind of start to like put yourself in the framework of an actual, you're acting in a way. And so you're like, okay, so what happens next? What do we do? And then that's, it's sort of almost like method acting, I guess, in a sense. And you have to kind of live inside of it and figure it out that way versus just, having it hit your eyeballs from a screen and then trying to infer what could possibly come out of that. So it should be messy. I think like obviously the visual branding stuff can be figured out ahead of time, and that's great stuff. But then when it comes to the actual, like, what are you guys making? What do you stand for? That has to be a inherent, or it should be like a messier process that's way more open-ended, that you leave yourself open to try stuff out and then figure out what works. And then you hit on, you're like, oh, this is who we are. This, like, ideally the stuff you make, also to my point earlier, like ideally it resonates with you, especially, and I'd say especially in outdoor brands, because like, I think outdoor brands are especially positioned because anybody in the space genuinely cares about the thing that they're doing, right? We all get into outdoor stuff because we love it. And so you want to make more of it. You want to get more people in. And obviously I would say that's a huge gap to, from the rest of the marketing world. Cause you could just be on like Energizer battery and you're like, well, I guess I care about batteries for the next 6 years of my life or whatever. Ritz crackers. And you're like, yeah, Ritz, I love the buttery flavors or whatever. But like, so that's a huge advantage in the outdoor space, is that we all love the thing that we get to do. And so ideally the stuff that we are making isn't just like selling, like finding the things that is like genuinely resonating with you. And if it's resonating with you, guarantee you're going to find a lot of other people that care about it as well. No one thought like a punk water brand or whatever would like have an audience, but turns out there's a lot of other people out there who like the same stuff that we like. No one had ever like thought to kind of make something that looked like them before, though.
So if you were in my shoes and I was trying to help some brands articulate their character, so to speak,
yeah,
what would you recommend? I mean, like, I could come up with stuff, but like, how do I, because I also know you've said like the immediate, anytime that it gets down on paper, it like loses its essence, or it loses what its potential. Any recommendations for how I could try and like walk that line between maintaining the integrity of the character while still finding ways to communicate it and translate it and help the team figure it out?
Yeah, I mean, not writing stuff down is a very bad idea, probably for like 99% of the use cases. I was just more like frustrated. So yeah, I mean, obviously you're going to have to write stuff down. But again, I think ideally it'd be like, let's go make stuff and then figure out the things that we like. And then again, like the same way that I point people to YouTube, I'm like, I'd rather have people watch some things. And even if they're like little test things that you're making, that's a better way to kind of pressure test all these things. But I think this sounds weird, but like it requires a significant amount of self-reflection, I think. And again, going back to like the outdoor space, where it's really created by the people behind it, and their passions. Like, I think like spending time with the founders or the marketing team and like kind of having some, I don't think like necessarily like soul searching questions, like, but I do think that I would say the process for me of like going back and understanding all the things that I love, like going back to my childhood, all the stuff that spoke to me and the movies I watched and the music and all that stuff and the projects I did in school, like starting to understand that now I'm like, oh, that's what I'm doing. And so it helps like feed into it. And so I think, I don't know, go get high with the whole marketing team. Is that a good idea? Probably not. But like, I think like trying to understand where people are coming from and then pooling that collectively, because I think part of that, part of your job is to be this like mirror of the organization back to itself as well, or at least kind of help them understand who they are, right? And so I think the more that you can spend time and get into the psychology of who are the decision makers and what do they care about and what is like leading internally, like what are the things that make the people distinct. I think there's probably little things to glean out of that and actually turn into the bigger brand things. I don't think there's enough emphasis on like the people inside the building, that help turn into the stuff that goes outside the building.
Yeah. Do you feel like it's easier or harder today to be distinct as a brand?
I don't think it's ever changed. I think, again, I think there's just a lot more all the time, everywhere, all at once. So, but I think the thing you see is that what often happens is that brands and people and everything just kind of follow the most currently successful thing, right? And so it's like everything looks like this. I just saw this New York Times thing about like gloopy design and like the retro internet 90s design and how, it's like, look at everybody that's designing stuff like that now. And so, yeah, that stuff works in the initial rocket phase because nobody looks like that. And then suddenly everyone adopts that. And then that just kind of becomes the standard thing. And so, yeah, I think like there always will be trends. And I think the goal is to find a thing that feels totally out of sync with what's going on. Like, I think like, I mean, to talk about like also content strategy and stuff with Liquid Death, like we intentionally, well, this is probably much less so in the outdoor space, but certainly with like mass market stuff, there's so much trend chasing on social and with paid and everything. And so it's like, suddenly everyone is posting the Taylor Swift meme in their feed and everybody looks like that today. And I understand why people need to do that, but I hate it. And so when we do stuff, we try to like launch it at total random. It's apropos of nothing. There's nothing that would lead you to believe that today we're going to launch, a urn with a Bluetooth speaker in the top with Spotify so you can play music into your ashes after you're dead. Like there's no reason to do that. That campaign was actually supposed to come out in Halloween, and I fought it because I was like, it's gonna feel like all the other Halloween stuff, and luckily it ended up getting moved. But like if you're sort of doing the thing that everyone else is doing, you just less noticing. And so intentionally, we try to make everything that we're doing like quote unquote timeless or like out of sync with time. And that's what makes it way more timeless and interesting inherently.
You said you don't like to use the word campaign.
Yeah.
Why is that?
It just because the things we do, like I don't have a better word for it. But we launch a bunch of pieces of content. Like we'll do something like probably 30 in a year, big pieces. And so they're like, we have to, there's stuff that goes around them that we do, PR pushes and emails and social posts and all. So it's like, it's kind of a thing that has to go out, but I don't like calling campaigns because they're sort of singular one-off pieces of content. But also I hate the word content. So I have no better, I don't know, videos, but videos sounds like so flippant. I don't know. I don't have a good word for it. Any of this. Also campaign. If you look into the etymology of it, it's like campaign was an assault. It comes from like the French French of like literally you're assaulting people. So I think like, the idea of a campaign is not a super, people forward way to think about it either, I'd say.
Yeah, there's a very military-esque
totally
focus in the world of marketing and how we target people and how it's
right.
Yeah. It's maybe indicative of like the larger philosophy around it all.
Yeah.
So I've seen this. I've looked at like the amount of money that some brands are spending on paid and the amount of money that they're investing into organic. One instance, it was like they're spending, it was like 400,000 annually on paid, something like 2,500 a quarter. So what is that? 10,000 annually in organic. It's a very big discrepancy there. I know it's a case by case situation. You don't know who it is. Why the discrepancy?
Because that media is going to get in front of people, right? It's like, it's the easiest choice. You're like, yes, I put this money in and then I get this thing out. And again, you can way more trackable. Obviously you can see the exact numbers that you're getting, conversions and click-throughs and all this stuff. And so organic doesn't allow you that sort of certainty or important measurement. So I think I totally understand it. And but there's also ways to do organic smarter. You can do you can boost content. You can do collabs with other people. Maybe you can work with you can work with content creators. There's ways that it's not just like, oh, we're gonna give the social team 10K this year and like, good luck, guys.
There's a perception out there that brand building is slow. It takes time, which it does. However, it seems like maybe you guys have figured out a way to expedite that process. Would you agree that brand building is inherently slow, that it has to be slow?
I mean, like I said earlier, it takes time, and you can't expect think of all the people you randomly meet at a party or at, wherever you're at, and you're like, I don't remember, how many times this happened the other night. I was meeting with someone. I was like, hey, nice to meet you. He was like, we've met before. And I was like, great. I'm so sorry. But like, it takes time with people, and it takes time with brands, anything like that. And, we get, especially nowadays, brands have such, as they probably should, little tiny less slivers of our attention. And so, yeah, you can't expect it to happen all at once. For us, think of we've put out, I can't even count how many pieces of work we've put out in the world to get to where we are now. But again, they were smaller pieces, and we didn't put a ton of effort into them. But I think it's inherently going to go slowly. And again, the other thing I'd say is talking about the quality of interaction. The quality of interaction is significant here. So if it's just, yes, you had some eyeballs exposed to this piece of, paid, is that really, that of course that's not gonna be brand building, but like the interesting thing with us is the can itself is such a wild interaction, because I've been told the story hundreds of times where people are like, man, I thought Liquid Death was a hard seltzer or a beer, and I was at a party and someone handed it to me and I was like, no, I wanted a water. And then I looked at it and they're like, it is a water. And then I had no idea what it was, and then I drank it and it was amazing. And so like that, a lot of like for us, a lot of that first interaction, this idea of like the interaction is us reframing what you thought of it in the first place. Maybe you're aware of it, but suddenly you have this total 180 on what we were. And then that's a really powerful connection with people that kind of kickstarts that like brand building process. But inherently you're going to have to, just like with anything else, you're going to have to, build a relationship with someone and get to know them, and you learn about them. And so, that certainly can take years. Also, I'd say it depends on the category. Sometimes it's like, this, you get a piece of gear and you're like, oh fuck, I love this. And you're just like in on that. That happens to me all the time where I find a gear brand that I love and I'm just like, well, I just do this now. So I think it certainly depends on the category as well.
Yeah. Okay. All right. What blind spots might we have based on what you understand at this point? Is there any assumptions here that you would challenge or push back on, or cautionary tales?
Cautionary tales. Yeah. I think the one, like, and I kind of said this before, the caveat is like, it's art and science, and you have to have both for them to function. You can't just be a really smart, you can't just be a really great marketer. You have to also back that up with like really great stuff that you're putting into the system as well. Because, we've been very lucky where we have a lot of smart people here over at Liquid Death. But then also the stuff that we're putting on the world, I get to be really dumb and make silly stuff that connects with people. And so I don't know, you have to, I'm very lucky that my team here, I'm surrounded by some really incredible artists and entertainers and people that I just have such high respect for them as creatives. And so, without that, Liquid Death looks a lot different. And I think like without, you have to serve both of those masters very equally for this stuff to work. It can't just be this sort of like academic pursuit of that. So that'd be the one thing I'd say is like, you got to have good stuff going in to get great stuff coming out.
If you had to leave the outdoor industry, I'm not presuming that the entire industry is listening to this podcast, but if so, but what would you want to leave? What would you want to leave them with? What sort of lasting thought or challenge or whatever?
I would say like, what's the stuff that you like? What's the stuff that gets you amped? I think that if anything, to me, that's my biggest thing, whether it's outdoor or beyond. It's that this marketing thing shouldn't be divorced from what you as a person genuinely like. And I think, again, I think there's such a big opportunity for brands that are having fun and not taking themselves so seriously, and that are just trying to like fuck around and have a good time. And look at the best work out there is always that stuff that that doesn't quite feel like it should be there to begin with. And so, but that's what's the most interesting thing to watch and see. And so I think it's like pulling whoever you are, kind of pulling your head out of your butts, looking around, and you're like, yeah, but what would be really fun to do? And I think there's not as much, and I think there's just not as a premium put on like the genuine act of having fun often enough. Because when you are having fun as the person behind it, people will have fun with you. That's what I've learned from this job, is like, if I'm having a really good time, the people can sense that through the work that we're making. And the biggest compliment that I always feel like I receive from people is like, man, it seems like you guys are having a lot of fun over there. And I'm like, yes, thank you. Like, if you can sense that through the work that we get to make, like, that is a crazy powerful psychic connection that we've made with people. And so like, if you can, as the person on the making side of things, if you can have fun doing it, people will 100% feel it on the other side. And like fun is a very contagious thing, and people will want to have fun with you. And yeah, I think that it sounds dumb to say out loud. It's like, have fun. But genuinely, if you can find the joy in it and having fun with it, it'll be felt from the outside as well.
Last question, and then I'll let you go. You guys are typically looked at or framed at as like marketing done right.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously for a lot of reasons. What are you guys doing wrong? What are you questioning? What are you what don't you know the answer to?
What don't I know the answer to? I mean, in some respects, we're making this up as we go along. You know, like, I don't think we have all the right answers. But I think that's why it works, is because we're not trying to be experts on anything. Anyone who's like telling you that this is the way it should work. And again, like, that's, hopefully that comes across. I'm not saying there's like a one size fits all. I'm just sort of like, hey, these are the things that work for us. But, yeah, I don't think that we're sort of making it up as we go along, but I mean that in a good way, because what it forces us to do is forces us to look at every situation that we come across or every decision we have to make. And we're like, okay, what should we do here? And I mean that in like a very naive sense of the way. It's like, okay, if there's the like, hey, this is what best practices say and the way it should work. And then there's this other of like, okay, we're a baby and we're presented with this idea, this thing, like, what would, if I knew nothing about it, what would the right answer be? And sometimes those things can be diametrically opposed. And so, yeah, I mean, I think like that's the nature of that causes, I would say, you know, it's a wacky ride some days, and I'm never surprised that I'm always surprised around here. I would say it's you can get whiplash on all the stuff that's flying around over here, but that's what makes it fun too. It just, you know, it's you have to, I would say, be a very battle tested and perhaps patient person to get that, like, you're on this wild ride. Well, one I have a bone to pick with certain things is that like ultra running isn't considered an extreme sport. I was actually looking up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was like, I've never heard it referred to as that, and then I looked up for work list of extreme sports on Wikipedia the other day, and there was no ultra running, and I was like, I don't know, I just ran 200 miles around Lake Tahoe in like 3 days. Like, that was pretty freaking extreme. I don't know how else to classify that than quite extreme. But I think the fun is like that sort of extreme athlete mentality, and even a lot of the people that work here come from backgrounds of snow and ski and all kinds of, and surf and all kinds of other stuff. And so, like, I do think a lot of us have that sort of mentality that allows us to kind of ride the wave, and we're like, all right, here comes another thing. Let's hop on and see where this one takes us. So, yeah, that's sort of a non-answer on what you just asked me. But I think basically things aren't always as smooth as they may be in other orgs, but like I think the people here are set up to succeed in that environment, and it's partly why we're able to do all the stuff that we're able to do, is because nothing ever stays the same over here.
And the fact that you haven't written anything down.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, we're making this up, man.
Andy, thanks for the time. I will let you get back to your day and whatever ultra races you have coming up. I appreciate the thoughts, and I appreciate, you spending the time with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's fun.
All right, take care.
Yeah.